I got sent to Valhalla with the god-tier powers of my game character. I was Zane Halbrook, a professional gamer who died one match before my third world championship. Bryn, the Valkyrie who collected my soul, believed those digital victories made me a real warrior, and she was only the first busty Valkyrie who refused to leave me alone. A real warrior called me a shrimp. A hammer beast charged while he was still laughing. 1% of Aldrich Stormborn's power lit up inside me. I stopped asking to go home, grabbed the sword, and cut the monster's head off before the insult finished echoing. That 1% carried real combat memory. Another death could strip away my ordinary human life and leave me as a warrior of steel. So the question became brutally simple. Could a gamer survive Valhalla's Ragnarok war long enough to unlock the other 99%? To understand how I reached that sword, go back to the championship final, one match before my third world title. The arena lights burned through my monitor glare. One more win would make me a 3-time world champion. My hands were already on the keys. I knew better than my own kitchen. Then my chest locked. My hand missed the mouse. My face hit the keyboard. The last sound I heard on Earth was the announcer shouting my name while Aldrich Stormborn stood frozen at the starting gate. Brutal timing. My body speed ran elimination before the match began. White light swallowed the arena. Bryn stepped through it in silver armor and a red cloak. My dying brain noticed the figure before the sword. Priorities survived longer than I did. She grabbed my wrist. Zane Halbrook, your glorious battles have earned you Valhalla. Those were computer tournaments. Put my soul back. Bryn checked the divine record. Hundreds of victories. Countless defeated champions. It had logged every win and skipped the keyboard. A weapon is still a weapon, she said. Divine paperwork had no appeal process. She pulled me through the light and dropped me among dead warriors built like tree trunks with anger issues. A bearskin fighter looked at my hoodie in soft hands. This is the champion. He looks lost. Another warrior pinched my sleeve. Maybe his great battle was laundry. I slapped his hand away. Touch me again and test my reactions. They laughed harder. 2 scarred men nearby realized one had killed the other in life. They stared, hugged, and started praising the duel and the son who later got revenge. Valhalla treated mutual homicide like a championship rematch. I pointed at them. Bryn, those are warriors. I fought pixels. Take me home. A horn blasted before she answered. Every fighter charged through a red-lit gate. Bryn shoved a sword into my hands. Stay behind them. Do not die. I already did that, Bryn replied. Then you have practice. Beyond the gate, monsters tore into shields. I backed toward a pillar and immediately attracted a hammer beast wider than a truck. It charged. I froze. An older veteran cut across me and killed it with one red burst from his axe. You move like a newborn deer, he said. I died 6 minutes ago, the veteran answered. Then improve quickly. The fading red power was a saga. In Valhalla, the deeds people remembered from life became strength. My greatest deeds happened through Aldrich Stormborn, then call that legend. I remembered every boss, hidden route, dragon war, and impossible campaign I had finished through Aldrich. Golden letters appeared. Immortal Warrior Saga. Synchronization, 1%. The number looked like predatory fine print. God-tier power, free trial package. Then another hammer beast charged. The veteran raised his axe. I stepped forward. The hammer missed my face by inches because Aldrich's combat memory moved my foot first. I dropped the sword. The bearskin fighter laughed. The shrimp lost his weapon. The beast lifted its hammer again. I saw the sword beside its foot and the 1% display shaking in my vision. So I stopped arguing with Valhalla. I dove, caught the hilt, and triggered Stormstride. The monster slowed. I slipped under its arm, turned exactly as Aldrich had turned thousands of times, and cut through the neck. Its head hit the dirt. I landed on my backside. The bearskin fighter's laugh died. His axe lowered. The veteran checked the cut, then offered me a hand. 1%? He asked. That is what the display says. The veteran gripped my forearm. Then, the other 99% should worry everyone. Warriors hammered weapons against shields and shouted my name. Public belief had already begun feeding the saga. Bryn reached me, grabbed my face, and checked both eyes. You were told to stay behind them. They moved. She looked at the head. You killed that? 1% killed it. I supervised. Her anger cracked into relief. The mockers saw Valhalla's prettiest recruiter holding my face and found a new reason to hate me. I hated how much I enjoyed it. That night, the rookie hall paid my victory with thin stew. The veteran pointed to armored figures standing motionless along the wall. They were warriors of steel. If I died again, Valhalla could rebuild me without hunger, sleep, pain, or ordinary human life. I had lost Earth already. I refused to lose the part that wanted food, complained about food, and noticed when Bryn leaned close. She leaned close to inspect my neck. Any pain? Bryn asked. Less than 5 seconds ago. Her eyes narrowed. What changed? Nothing relevant to medicine? 2 tables away, the bearskin fighter watched Bryn inspect me and found a new reason to hate me. Cafeteria scandal unlocked. An armored Valkyrie brought goblets showing which god had claimed each rookie. Famous war gods drew cheers and crowded lines. My cup showed a name nobody around me recognized. The hall laughed. One warrior offered me his empty goblet. Across the room, Bryn stood alone beside a tiny banner. She saw my cup and grabbed both my hands. "You're ours? I'm starting to suspect that." Bryn squeezed my hands. Idun's legion hasn't received a young warrior in years. The famous gods had crowds. Idun had 1 recruit and 1 gorgeous Valkyrie celebrating like she had won the draft. Honestly, I could have landed worse. The veteran who had saved me caught us at the door and finally gave his name. Gunnar. He wished me luck with the Forgotten Legion, which sounded suspiciously like condolences. Bryn rowed me across a dark lake before dawn. On the far shore stood Idun's quiet temple, small enough that no rival legion bothered interfering with it. During the ride, Bryn gave me the only world explanation I needed. Asgard, the realm Valhalla defended, was fighting Muspelheim, the enemy realm. The destroyed lands between them showed what happened when that enemy advanced. If Ragnarok reached Valhalla, every legion fell with it. Can warriors ever return to their old worlds? I asked. Bryn's oars slowed. If this war ends, the paths between worlds may open again. A route home had appeared with one minor requirement: help finish the apocalypse first. Inside Idun's temple, Bryn placed a golden apple on a seal beneath a statue. Light spread through the stone. The statue stepped down as a living woman crowned in gold and green. Idun, goddess of youth and life, looked at me with amused eyes. She was graceful, warm, and very clearly the reason nobody should judge a legion by its attendance numbers. "Kneel, Zane Halbrook," Idun commanded. I obeyed immediately. Recklessness still had limits. Idun rested one hand on my head. Golden warmth poured through my spine. Years of neck pain vanished. The knot in my lower back released. My stomach stopped burning. Even the numbness in my fingers disappeared. I stood straighter than I had since high school. Bryn circled me once, smiling like she had personally repaired defective equipment. Idun's mark strengthens life. Other legions call us the zombie team because killing our warriors properly is difficult. The supposedly weak legion had just restored every injury my professional career had built. The crowded famous legions suddenly looked less impressive than our empty temple. Idun touched the apple seal again. "Grow strong, little champion. Make them remember my name." Then she returned to stone. Outside, Bryn took my hand and promised she would help me survive long enough to seek Earth again. My brain immediately produced a house, 2 children, and Bryn cooking breakfast in my old team jersey. She handed me dinner. The meat was burned black. Domestic delusion terminated. System stability restored. By sunrise, Bryn was explaining the runes I had earned from my first kill. Runes could strengthen my body or magic. Public belief also fed a saga, meaning every witness who repeated my legend could help Aldrich's power become more real. "So fame is a combat stat," I said. Bryn tightened the straps on my new armor. "Then try becoming famous without dying." A battle bell rang before I could answer. A portal opened behind her. Bryn pushed a helmet against my chest and held my gaze. "Come back to me!" I asked her for luck. She adjusted my collar with both hands. "You have my luck." Then the portal pulled me into my first organized war. The portal threw me into a staging field packed with organized warriors. Bryn's last warning was still in my ears, and a commander from Heimdall's frontline legion was already deciding I belonged in the rear. He looked at my new armor, then at my face. Idun's recruit carries water and stays behind the shields. One monster kill had promoted me to hydration duty. Gunnar found me beside the supply carts and slapped my shoulder. "Stay close. This formation knows what it's doing." A white-furred boss landed in front of the formation. Then the formation stopped knowing what it was doing. The monster was Frostmaw, and it carried a hammer thick enough to flatten 3 men at once. The commander ordered a full charge. Frostmaw swung once and erased the front rank. Shields, helmets, and confidence scattered across the snow. The commander disappeared under the second strike. Look, I respected military experience. I also respected obvious boss mechanics. Charging the glowing hammer twice donated bodies. 5 runes waited inside my mark. Bryn had told me they could strengthen one part of my body immediately. I spent all 5 on agility. Gunnar grabbed my arm. "All of them? Frostmaw can't kill what it can't touch." That sentence becomes embarrassing if it touches you. He had a point. I dropped the heavy shield the commander had given me. Frostmaw saw the smaller target stepping forward and roared. The survivors behind me stopped retreating long enough to watch the rookie volunteer for suicide. The hammer came down. Stormstride pulled me past the impact. Snow exploded behind my heels. Frostmaw turned too slowly, exactly like a boss locked inside a recovery animation. The beast recovered faster on the second swing. Its hammer scraped my backplate and launched me across the snow. My new agility kept the hit from becoming a grave, but the armor split and one shoulder went numb. Gunnar started toward me. I raised one hand without looking back. "Stay with the formation! One man cannot be a formation," he shouted. "Working on it!" Frostmaw charged while I was still rising. The surviving frontline warriors expected me to retreat behind them. Instead, I ran toward the hammer, because every boss pattern becomes kinder once you stop standing where it wants you. The hammer swept sideways. I planted one foot on its stone head and used the moving weapon as a step. I climbed the creature's arm before it could reverse. A shield bearer below lowered his shield just to follow the movement. Another warrior pointed at Frostmaw's exposed eye and shouted the opening. I ran across one massive shoulder and drove my sword into its eye. The beast screamed and threw me into the air. My blade stayed buried in the socket. For one ugly second, I was falling without a weapon while Frostmaw lifted its hammer. Then Warrior Arsenal answered. A fresh sword formed in my hand. It matched Aldrich's old tournament skin down to the gold line on the guard. I drove it through the damaged eye. Frostmaw dropped hard enough to shake snow from the trees. The rear lines stared. One shield bearer slowly put down the water bucket he had expected me to carry. Gunnar looked from the summoned sword to the corpse and started laughing. Then the chant began, rolling across the snow in one name. Zane! Zane! I raised the golden blade toward them. The sound hit the same nerve as a tournament crowd. My heart wanted the stage again, even if the stage now had giant corpses and terrible health insurance. High above the field, a raven belonging to Odin, Valhalla's ruler, had watched everything. Eloan later told me she had been viewing through it. The Ice Princess Valkyrie had ignored most of the rookie batch. Then the skinny gamer spent every rune on speed and stabbed a boss through the eye. My synchronization rose to 5%. The army refused to let me enjoy it. Gunnar pointed toward Ironmouth Fortress beyond the snow. Frostmaw guarded the road. The fortress is the real objective. That night, our tents went up beneath its walls. My saga display showed 5% synchronization and 2 empty slots for Aldrich's abilities. Bryn arrived before I could choose. She ducked into my tent, saw the summoned sword, and demanded to inspect my saga record. I showed her the list of Aldrich's completed legends, dragon wars, immortal kings, ruined armies, impossible victories. Bryn read the first few lines. Her mouth opened, then she covered her face and started crying. I panicked harder than I had against Frostmaw. Did I break a divine law? Bryn grabbed my shoulders. I treated you like a helpless rookie. I was a helpless rookie. Bryn shook me. You carried the record of a world-conquering hero. In a game. Bryn lowered her hands. You still mastered every battle. Valhalla recognized the achievement because it belonged to you. She touched one of the longest entries. The saga display brightened beneath her fingertip. In Valhalla, belief had weight. I watched you doubt every step after arriving, Bryn whispered. I thought Idun had received someone fragile. This says you spent years defeating impossible things and never called them real because the battlefield was digital. I also yelled at teammates over microphone settings. Bryn sniffed. That is less heroic. Her laugh broke through the tears. Then she looked at the 5% number and pressed her lips together. You have all this history and can reach almost none of it yet. The legend was enormous. My body had access to a sliver, and every public win told stronger enemies that the sliver existed. She hugged me before I found a reply. Her armor was warm. Her hair brushed my cheek. My mind briefly left the mission and entered a much less tactical genre. Bryn tightened the hug. Your arrival was incredible luck for Idun. That brought me back. Before leaving, Bryn made me summon the sword. She pressed one rune against the flat. Heat ran along the edge, then died when I dismissed it. Warrior Arsenal can carry a short elemental charge, she explained. One weapon at a time. I had room for another saga expression. A second attack looked attractive, but the fortress needed information more than extra violence. So I chose Dragon Sight, Aldrich's ability to read threats, weak points, and magical patterns. The new vision opened too fast. Colors flooded the tent. Bryn's lifemark blazed gold. The fortress outside looked layered with red signals. My head split with pain, and Bryn caught me before I hit the ground. Useful? She asked. Painfully. She stared for one beat, then pushed my forehead away with 2 fingers. Sleep, champion. The headache was worth it. Before dawn, the dead commander's unit was folded under a new team. Dax, an archer from Uller's scouting legion, became our scout. He demonstrated his invisibility by vanishing, stealing Gunnar's cup, and reappearing beside me. Dax pointed at my tent. The Valkyrie stayed a long time. She inspected my sagas. Is that what they call it in Idun's legion? The rumor had been alive for 10 seconds and already needed killing. Then Romy arrived, the blue-haired warrior leading our assault group. She was known as the Manhunter because monsters usually noticed her right before they stopped moving. She was tall, composed, and carried a bow longer than I was tall. Dragon Sight named 2 saga expressions around her. Never! Miss Arrow curved shots toward marked targets. Wolf Witch could turn her into a giant spectral wolf and hide a motionless pack under a veil. Romy noticed the appraisal glow in my eyes. Finished staring? Dragon Sight gives too much information. Dax leaned closer. How much? Romy's hand moved toward one dagger. Enough, I said. Our first corridor held armored insect troops with no visible commander. Dragonsight found the hidden leader behind the third column. Center rear, I told Romy, the one pretending to carry orders. Romy drew once. Never! Miss Arrow ignited across the string. The shot curved between shields and entered the hidden officer's throat. The insect formation collapsed immediately. Romy lowered the bow and looked at me again. This time the suspicion had become tactical interest. Call the next one before I waste arrows. Dax nodded as if he had negotiated the partnership personally. Beautiful teamwork, terrible flirting. We pushed deeper until the fortress corridors ended at reinforced rune barrels. Eloin called the tactic, Steel Rain. Dax and I nodded like experienced professionals until soldiers locked us into cylindrical shells and rolled us toward enormous cannons. The reinforced barrels were built to survive the impact. Nobody had made the same promise about our backs. Dax's voice came through the barrel wall. Are we not already in Valhalla? A loader answered. You can arrive twice. The cannon fired. My barrel crossed the snow, smashed through Ironmouth's outer wall, and opened upside down inside a barracks. I crawled out beside stunned monsters and attacked before my spine could submit a complaint. Romy's unit entered through other impact holes. Dax landed in a storage room and emerged wearing an enemy helmet he claimed was tactical camouflage. Dragonsight mapped red signals toward the gate controls. The direct corridor was sealed, so Dax led us through a service tunnel. The first web hit my face. So much for the safe route. Dragonsight showed dozens of venomous bodies nested across the ceiling. Fighting them in the tunnel would feed the colony one warrior at a time, but the webs glowed as dry fuel. I charged warrior arsenal with heat and threw the burning sword upward. The ceiling caught fire. Spiders fell around us. Dax turned visible purely to look horrified. Run, I told him. We sprinted while fire rolled through the nest. My first sword vanished inside the flames, so I summoned another without slowing. The final spider lunged through the closing door. I cut it in half and slammed the metal bar down. Dax stared at the fresh sword. You can replace those? As long as the saga holds. He looked back at the burning tunnel. That information would have improved my last minute emotionally. Minutes after the spider nest, Dax shoved an emergency key into the fortress control device. A glowing woman appeared above it, the gatekeeper spirit assigned to obey whoever held the key. Dax and the surviving scout forgot the battle. The spirit's dress was doing heroic work under difficult conditions. I understood their struggle. I also heard enemy footsteps getting closer. Tell her to open the main gate, I snapped. Dax cleared his throat. Open the door. The gatekeeper's spirit opened a tiny storage closet. I grabbed the key. Open Ironmouth Fortress's outer battle gate. Now! Stone thundered beneath us. Outside, Valhalla's army charged through the opening. Then Bloodgaze, the fortress commander, smashed through the control room door. He moved faster than Frostmaw. Bloodgaze crushed the surviving scout against a wall and drove Dax behind the device. I triggered Stormstride, launched from a broken pillar, and aimed the aerial sword strike that had killed Frostmaw. Bloodgaze looked up. He had seen the pattern. His hand caught me in midair. He drove me through the floor. The first impact cracked the stone. He lifted me and slammed me again, making sure Dax and the gatekeeper spirit saw the lesson. You killed Frostmaw with one trick, Bloodgaze growled. Did you think commanders never learn? He threw my broken body beside the control device. Dax fired 2 arrows. Bloodgaze knocked one aside and let the second strike his shoulder. The shaft barely entered. Dax looked at me, then at the gate still opening outside. He needed to keep the boss facing him long enough for the army to enter, so he made himself loud. Commander, Dax called, your fortress is already lost. Bloodgaze turned toward him. I only need to kill the hands on the key. The gatekeeper spirit moved behind the device. Dax stepped in front of her and drew a flaming binding arrow. His usual grin had disappeared. Pain emptied my lungs. My arms stopped answering. Bloodgaze leaned over the crater, saw the broken rookie, and turned toward Dax. That contempt saved me. Dax fired a flaming line around Bloodgaze's legs. The binding dragged the boss sideways. Bloodgaze roared at the visible threat. I stayed limp. He stepped over me. I caught the sword beside my hand and used Stormstride from the floor. The blade went between his legs. Bloodgaze made a sound no fortress commander should ever make in public. Every man in the room understood the injury at once. Dax's face folded. Even the gatekeeper spirit looked away. I felt terrible for almost half a second. Bloodgaze dropped to one knee. His hammer hit the floor beside him, and Aldrich's buried memory answered the weapon. A new saga form opened. Skullbreaker. I summoned a warhammer, stepped inside Bloodgaze's desperate swing, and brought it down on his head. The floor cracked. The commander stayed there. Ironmouth Fortress fell before sunset. My synchronization reached 7%. Dax and the surviving warriors carried me into the feast hall while the whole fortress chanted my name. Romy offered me a drink. Gunnar raised both hands as if he had personally trained me for years instead of preventing one early death. Then Dax told the story. He described the spider fire, the gate, the pile driver, and my comeback. He gave the disabling / enough detail that every warrior near him crossed his legs. By midnight, the whole fortress was calling my comeback the Nutcracker Strike. I had approved nothing. Saga belief rose anyway. Humiliation counted as experience. Eloin entered the hall and lifted one hand. Zane has a visitor. Bryn stepped through the crowd. The warriors erupted louder than they had for Bloodgaze's death. Someone shouted advice about surviving an all-nighter. Dax offered to lend me ceremonial oil. Romy threatened 3 men without leaving her seat. Bryn took my wrist and pulled me toward the tents, red-faced but smiling. At dawn, Dax would demand details. I already knew my answer. Secret. After the Ironmouth party, Bryn pulled me into my tent while half the fortress predicted scandal. The actual all-nighter lasted 12 minutes and involved medical equipment. Bryn placed a small pendant around my neck. A golden apple fragment glowed inside the metal. The golden apple pendant will accelerate ordinary healing, purge poison, and resist curses, Bryn explained. The fragment inside it can release once if your life reaches its limit. 1 emergency resurrection. 1 emergency chance, she corrected. Do not test the wording. Bryn tapped the pendant. Valkyries can take sacred beast forms tied to their sagas, but I can't always reach you before the wound lands. Carry this. She touched the bruise Bloodgaze had left across my jaw. Her fingers stayed there longer than the diagnosis required. You keep coming back broken, she whispered. I also keep coming back. Bryn leaned forward and kissed my forehead in Idun's name. My brain stopped processing language for a clean 3 seconds. The pendant had not even activated, and I was already suffering symptoms. Then Bryn stepped away. Rest. Romy has another mission at dawn. Of course she did. Valhalla treated recovery like a rumor. At sunrise, Romy pointed our team toward the sealed eastern side of Ironmouth Mines. The dwarves who lived there had stopped answering after the fortress occupation. Our job was to find survivors and secure anything the enemy had taken. Dax raised his hand. Will there be dwarven ale? Romy looked at him. There may be dwarven corpses. That didn't answer the ale question. Black Lightning, Valhalla's coffin-shaped transport, answered it for her. The launch packed us into sealed containers, fired us across the mountains, and buried every container in snow. Mine opened upside down. I crawled out with the pendant warm against my chest. Dax lay face first nearby, reconsidering every life choice that had led to fast travel. Romy kicked open her lid. Count, we had everyone. Barely. The mine fortress looked abandoned from outside. Inside, dragon sight marked movement above the entrance. Archers, I warned. Arrows dropped from the rafters. We raised shields, but the attackers were short, broad, and dead. Undead dwarves fired from balconies while strange old rank titles flickered over them through dragon sight. Dax glanced up. Even the corpses have better job titles than me. A living dwarf hurled a firebomb between us. Flame cut off the next arrow volley. This way, the dwarf engineer shouted. The escape shaft admitted 1 warrior at a time. Romy went last, turning sideways in the opening while arrows struck the shield on her arm. Dax covered her from below. I used dragon sight to mark 2 undead archers loading explosive bolts. Upper left, red beard, then the one missing an ear. Dax fired twice. The first corpse dropped its bolt into the balcony, and the explosion threw 3 other archers over the rail. Its partner spun backward before releasing. Romy entered the shaft as stone collapsed across the opening. Inside, the engineer counted us. 2 warriors were bleeding. One had an undead arrow through the thigh. He tried to pull it free, and the dwarf slapped his hand away. Barbed, the engineer barked. Break the shaft first. The warrior obeyed. Practical bedside manner appeared to be universal. The engineer dragged us through a narrow shaft while undead axes struck the stone behind our backs. He was the last visible survivor of the mine colony, and he delivered the problem while running. A vampire had seized the mines. Most dwarves were dead or converted. The colony had recently found a speck of divine metal, enough to strengthen runes and forge a god-class item. The sacred anvil could refine it only beneath direct sunlight or moonlight through an opening in the roof. 4 facts. 1 bad lunch deadline. The vampire weakened under noon sun, so we had to reach the anvil chamber before the light shifted. Dax looked at the dark tunnels. And if the vampire already knows that? The engineer lit another bomb. Then you die educated. I liked him. We reached an old gambling hall minutes before noon. Undead dwarves were still seated around stone tables, cards in their dead hands and mugs beside them. When they saw us, the entire room stood. The surviving dwarves answered with wind magic and cannons. Tables flipped, cards flew. One undead gambler kept holding a winning hand until a cannon removed the table beneath him. Romy drove through the center. Dax covered the balconies. I marked the fastest undead with dragon sight and cut open the route to the anvil room. Then the room beyond went silent. The vampire appeared beside me before I saw him move. One hand closed around my throat. The other tore through two warriors who had entered behind us. He threw their bodies aside and smiled at Romy. A shield bearer charged to recover me. The vampire kicked the shield inward, caught the warrior by the helmet, and hurled him into the sacred anvil. Metal rang once. The man stayed down. Romy changed the formation immediately. No solo attacks. Pin his feet. Dax fired binding lines at both ankles. The dwarf engineer triggered a floor vent that blasted stone dust into the vampire's face. I drove my heel against his knee while he held my throat. Nothing moved him. He lifted me higher so the others could see how little their plan mattered. The room had assumed noon would make him weak. He was using my body to prove the assumption had been expensive. "The medal is mine," the vampire announced. "The strongest among you will serve me after death." Romy's arrows hit him from 3 angles. He walked through them. The engineer fired a cannon, turning the floor black. The vampire stepped out with torn clothes and no concern. Dax launched a binding shot. The vampire snapped the line and used me as a shield. He had speed, strength, regeneration, and the confidence of a man who had never been forced to experience consequences. I needed the room to hurt him for us. Dragonsight caught a metal lever beside the sacred anvil. I kicked away from the vampire, twisted free of his grip, and pulled it. The roof opened. Noon sunlight poured down. The vampire's skin hardened into stone. His knees struck the floor. The engineer raised an axe, and Romy drew a silver-headed arrow. Dax fired a binding line around the petrified arms. 2 surviving warriors rushed in with stakes and blades. The whole team saw the noon plan working at once, and that visible success made everyone close too quickly. The engineer reached the vampire first. His axe bit into the stone shoulder and stopped halfway. Romy's silver arrow entered the chest but did not reach the heart beneath the hardened skin. The weakness had dropped the boss. It had not finished him. I kept one hand on the roof lever and watched clouds forming beyond the opening. The vampire's eyes were still moving inside the stone face. He had prepared a response to the room's only obvious answer. The vampire looked up at the sky and screamed. Clouds rolled across the opening. Sunlight vanished. Moonlight replaced it. The stone cracked off his body. You know a villain is committed when he turns his own weakness into a phase transition? The vampire dissolved into hundreds of bats. They circled the chamber and merged above us. They became a winged monster large enough to fill the roof opening. Acid sprayed from its mouth. One shield melted. Warriors scattered as the stone floor hissed beneath their boots. The bat crashed into Romy's formation. I used Stormstride, jumped onto its back, and drove Warrior Arsenal between the scales. The blade snapped. Now I was riding an acid-spitting vampire with no weapon and no exit plan. The vampire's voice came from the beast's throat. "Get off! I'm considering it. I will let you live." That offer needed better timing. Something in Aldrich's legacy responded to the creature beneath me. He had commanded dragons and broken wild mounts far worse than this. Beast Commander opened. Golden pressure slammed down through my hands. The giant bat shrank beneath me. Wings folded. Fangs shortened. A tiny black bat dropped into my palms. The room stopped fighting. Dax let the bowstring slacken. The dwarf engineer slowly set down the cannon fuse. A wounded warrior behind the anvil peeked over cover, saw the tiny bat, and laughed until his ribs objected. Romy lowered her bow. Her eyes followed the little creature when it squeaked. "Do not pet the vampire," I warned. "I wasn't going to." Her hand had already moved halfway forward. The tiny vampire glared at me with the rage of a tyrant trapped inside a travel-sized body. For one glorious breath, the apex predator looked like an angry plush toy. Then Beast Commander slipped. The vampire exploded back into full size and threw me across the chamber. Control over an intelligent monster was temporary. Fine. I only needed the window once. I summoned another sword, caught its next dive with Beast Commander, and forced the turn toward the anvil platform. "Jump!" I shouted. Romy and Dax cleared the impact zone. I released control at the last second and leaped away. The vampire hit the sacred platform headfirst. One wing broke, but moonlight was already rebuilding it. The creature sprayed acid toward Romy. She dragged the wounded engineer behind the anvil while Dax shot the jaw sideways. Acid cut a smoking trench through the wall instead. I came down with Skullbreaker. The hammer crushed the healing wing and drove the vampire deeper into the platform. It still clawed toward me. Romy put 3 arrows through the same wrist. The engineer crawled close enough to jam an iron wedge through the elbow joint. "Now it stays," he growled. The engineer rolled 3 explosive charges under the body. Dax, because his sense of proportion had died in the spider tunnel, grabbed an undead skeleton and threw that in too. "Why?" Romy shouted. "Emotional support!" The explosion swallowed the chamber. When the smoke thinned, Dragonsight found no life inside the wreckage. The vampire was finally dead. Romy checked the body twice. The dwarf engineer checked a 3rd time, then opened the protected chest beside the anvil. Inside lay a sliver of divine metal smaller than my fingernail. Dax stared at it. "We lost people for that?" The engineer snatched the fragment back. "That speck can become a ring strong enough to amplify a warrior's runes." Romy accepted the chest for Valhalla. "Then stop breathing over it, Dax. I was trying to see it." The surviving dwarves demanded a victory celebration before we left. They also opened their weapon vault as payment. Axes, armor, rings, and enchanted tools covered every wall. Dax reached for the largest crossbow. I activated Dragon Sight. Most items glowed faintly. One light cloak burned blue. I chose it. The engineer called it the Sky Feather Cloak. Its magic could turn the wearer into a falcon. Dax looked at the tiny clasp. "You passed on an enchanted siege bow for bird clothing?" I fastened the cloak and transformed. A falcon launched from where I had been standing, circled the vault, and landed on Romy's shoulder. Romy looked at Dax. "His choice travels faster." I changed back beside her. "Also, your shoulder is comfortable." Romy pushed my face away. "Enjoy it once." That evening, I flew above the black lightning coffins carrying our fallen companions home. The new cloak made the return easy. The bodies below made the victory heavy. Those warriors would rise again as warriors of steel. They had saved the mine, but they would wake without hunger, pain, or the ordinary comforts I was fighting to keep. Romy flew beside the coffins on a borrowed mount for part of the route. When one container shifted in the wind, she reached down and steadied it until the transport line leveled. Dax saw the gesture and stopped talking too. The vampire was dead, and the divine metal was secure. The bill still traveled home with us. I stopped joking until we landed. Romy delivered the report to Eloin. The divine metal went into guarded storage. Dax tried to describe the vampire's cute phase and was ordered to use the words temporarily controlled in the official version. Romy caught me before I left. "You contributed most," she said. "The lever, the control, the crash. Don't let Dax's skeleton steal the story." He named it emotional support. I heard. My synchronization reached 9%. New saga shapes stirred behind the ones I already held. Before the report cooled, Linnea came back from patrol at full speed. Her wind cloak was torn. Snow had frozen across one side of her armor. Eloin stepped toward her. "What did you see?" Linnea braced both hands on the table. "More than 6,000 enemies. They're marching on Blackwall Keep, the fortress holding our next line." Blackwall had 2,500 defenders. Then Linnea came back with an army behind her. At sunrise, Blackwall Keep had 2,500 defenders on its walls. More than 6,000 enemies were crossing the snow toward us. Linnea had returned with the warning. Eloin turned the warning into orders before anyone finished being afraid. The Ice Princess stood above the central gate with her spear planted in the stone. A pale barrier curved over the keep. Every strike against it left another bright crack. Warriors packed the walls 3 rows deep. Engineers braced the western ballista, while healers dragged the wounded away from the firing lanes. I transformed with the Sky Feather Cloak and rose above the battlements as a falcon. From the air, the numbers looked worse. Enemy infantry covered the snow. Harpies circled above them. Dragon riders waited behind the first wave. One commander prayed for permission to release the Valkyries' sealed power. The answer never came. Odin's refusal did not solve the battle. It made the mortals responsible for surviving it. Eloin pointed her spear toward the eastern wall. "Zane, find the pressure point!" Dragon Sight opened across the field. The enemy was not attacking evenly. 3 shield columns protected a rune carrier moving toward the barrier's weakest crack. I changed back on the wall and pointed. "Third column. The small giant behind the shields is carrying the breaker." Romy marked the target with "Never Miss Arrow." Her shot curved through 2 gaps, but the giant caught it against one shield. Dax fired from the opposite tower. His bolt struck the giant's knee and forced the shield lower. I crossed the battlement with Stormstride and threw a charged sword through the opening. The blade entered the rune carrier's chest. Its device exploded before reaching the wall. The eastern crack stopped growing. The defenders cheered once. Then a dragon slammed into the barrier. The impact threw men from their feet. A second dragon followed, scraping claws across the pale surface until another crack opened. Eloin's spear shook in her hands. "Air riders," she ordered, "break the next pass." We had no air riders close enough, so I became a falcon again. I flew beneath the nearest dragon, changed back above its saddle, and landed behind the enemy rider. The rider turned too late. I struck his wrist, took the reins, and shoved him from the saddle. The dragon tried to throw me immediately. Beast Commander pressed through my hands. The creature resisted, rolled, and almost introduced me to the wall head first. I held long enough to turn its next dive away from the barrier. The stolen dragon crossed above thousands of warriors. Dax looked up from the western tower. He upgraded from Valkyries to enemy livestock. Romy answered without lowering her bow. "Focus." I summoned warrior arsenal while the dragon banked. A spear appeared in my hand. It was made of bamboo. I looked at the weapon, then at the armored harpy leader in front of me. Aldrich's legendary arsenal had remembered a beginner tutorial item at the worst possible time. The harpy leader laughed. I threw the bamboo spear through its open mouth. The laugh stopped. The dragon carried me through the flock while I replaced the weapon with golden blades. Below, the defenders watched the enemy's own mount tear a path through its air support. One dragon rider fled. Another tried to intercept and collided with the harpies scattering from me. The sky cleared over the western tower. That gave Romy and Dax room to use the ballista. The frame had cracked under the first barrage. An engineer held the brace with both arms while Dax loaded a cable bolt. Romy placed one hand on the weapon and marked the largest flying target. "Never miss," Dax told her. Romy's eyes narrowed. "Do not turn my saga into encouragement." They fired. The cable bolt curved upward, wrapped around a dragon's wing, and dragged the creature into the snow outside the wall. The defenders roared, then the ground shook harder than the barrier. A white-furred giant rose from the enemy line, taller than the wall, and marked with Loki's symbols. It carried no weapon. It did not need one. The giant struck the barrier with both hands. Half the cracks spread at once. Elwyn dropped to one knee but kept the spear planted. Bastian climbed onto the western wall. He was a broad warrior from Thor's legion who had spent the morning holding that tower together. Blood ran down one side of his face. He raised his axe and activated Son of Thunder. Lightning wrapped his body. Bastian jumped from the wall and struck the giant's forearm. The blow cut only a shallow line. The giant looked at the tiny wound. Bastian looked too. Then he laughed. "I made it bleed!" he roared. The defenders answered him. One small cut proved the boss was not part of the weather. Men who had been backing away returned to the firing line. The giant reached for Bastian. I drove the stolen dragon between them and pulled him clear. The giant's hand caught the dragon instead. It slammed both of us into the wall. Stone broke beneath my back. The pendant at my neck cracked automatically at the lethal threshold. My mind gave the trigger Bryn's shape because it needed a face for the life rushing back into me. A golden apple broke between remembered teeth. Then divine warmth exploded through my chest. Bones pulled together. My lungs opened. The one-use fragment inside the pendant went dark. I stood inside the crater before the giant expected movement. Bastian stared at me. "You were dead!" "Extremely temporary." The barrier failed above us. Eloan dropped from the wall in white light. Her human shape stretched into a long white dragon with bright scales and antler-like horns. She landed between the giant and the gate. "Get on," Eloan ordered. I climbed onto her back. Every warrior on the wall saw it. Dax's future storytelling career received dangerous material. Eloan launched straight at the giant's face. Romy marked the forehead. Dax and the engineer turned the repaired ballista toward the same point. Bastian struck the knee again with Son of Thunder. The giant bent just enough. The ballista fired. Romy's mark curved the bolt into the forehead. Eloan climbed above the wound and folded her wings. I stood on her back with the last of my divine strength gathering around warrior arsenal. Stormstride compressed lightning along the blade. "Storm charge!" Eloan drove downward. I left her back at the final instant and followed the ballista bolt through the forehead wound. Golden lightning crossed the giant's skull. The body remained upright for one impossible second. Then, the giant stayed down. Bastian raised his axe from the snow. Dax climbed onto the ballista and pointed at the corpse. Romy stood beside him with the bow still smoking. The defenders roared all four of our names. The enemy line broke in the opposite direction. Climbers dropped from the wall. Dragon riders fled north. On the western tower, one warrior pulled Bastian's injured friend upright and forced him to see the result. Linnea lowered her spear only after the final crack in the barrier stopped spreading. Eloan landed in human form beneath me. I realized I was still holding her shoulders. She glanced back. "Comfortable? Extremely tactical." Her smile was small and dangerous. "Get off." Blackwall Keep survived. That night, 3 Valkyries entered the banquet hall wearing white ceremonial dresses. The warriors who had fought 6,000 monsters suddenly forgot how cups worked. A northern Valkyrie announced the promotions. Bastian and I had both reached the lower rank. A new rank meant better food and a private cabin. More importantly, it meant I had survived another battle without becoming steel. Eloan personally poured Bastian's drink, then mine. The entire hall started chanting, "Ride! Ride! Ride!" Dax stood on a bench. "To Zane Halbrook, the first man in this hall brave enough to ride a Valkyrie in public." Romy yanked him down by the belt. "It was a combat form," I shouted. That explanation made the chanting worse. I drank to escape the conversation. One cup hit me harder than Frostmaw. By the second, the room had started rotating. Bastian watched me grip the table and looked personally betrayed. "You killed a giant," he said. "The giant did not contain alcohol." Eloan covered a laugh with her cup. Linnea leaned toward Bryn, who had arrived late, and whispered something that turned Bryn's cheeks red. I tried to stand. The floor won. Later, Bryn told me the divine flare from our final attack had reached an unnamed legend. She had petitioned him because she could teach runes, healing, and legion rules, but not practical divinity at his level. The legend mocked the report and claimed his own children could do better. Then he agreed to test me. 7 days after promotion, my new cabin started shaking before breakfast. Lightning crawled across the trees outside. A cloaked man stood in the clearing, broad shoulders hidden beneath dark cloth. Dragonsight identified Ragnar Lothbrok, the legendary Viking. He looked at my new cabin, then at me. "Come outside," Ragnar ordered. "We are going to fight." Ragnar Lothbrok arrived at my cabin 1 week after the siege and introduced himself by trying to murder me. He stood in the clearing wrapped in lightning. Dragonsight identified the legendary Viking before he lowered his hood. That was useful because his greeting contained no name and even less courtesy. "Fight," Ragnar ordered. "I haven't eaten." "Then you will be lighter." He attacked. The first strike crossed the clearing before I finished summoning a sword. I blocked with warrior arsenal. The golden blade broke. Ragnar's second strike took the ground from under me. His third sent me through the cabin wall. I activated Stormstride and escaped through the hole before the fourth arrived. Ragnar followed without hurrying. That made it worse. I changed the skyfeather cloak and became a falcon as his weapon cut through the space where my neck had been. The blade missed feathers by inches. I rose above the trees, changed back, and dropped with Skullbreaker. Ragnar caught the hammer with one hand. He looked at the weapon, then at me. "You borrow endings," he said. He threw me into the lake. Bryn reached the clearing as I crawled out. She stepped between us with her shield raised. "I asked you to teach him." Ragnar looked over her shoulder. "I am learning whether he survives the lesson. You were supposed to evaluate his divinity." "I evaluated his wall." The cabin leaned behind him. My private housing benefit had lasted 1 week. I attacked again because anger was warmer than the lake. Ragnar broke Stormstride's root with one step. He caught my wrist, turned the sword away, and put me on the ground. Dragonsight found no clean opening, so I stopped looking for one. I dismissed the sword while he held my wrist and summoned it in the other hand. The new blade touched his throat. Ragnar's weapon touched mine. The pressure split the ground between us, but he stopped attacking. "Better," he said. I stayed on the ground. That sounded almost human. Ragnar looked at Bryn. His practical instinct is stronger than his body. The legacy could approach Sigurd if he survives long enough. Bryn's entire face changed. My humiliation had become a legendary recommendation. Ragnar offered one hand and pulled me upright. "I came because your flair carried an old quality," he said. "You build answers instead of worshipping forms." Bryn crossed her arms. "That is why I petitioned you." Ragnar looked at the destroyed cabin. "You should have petitioned a carpenter too." He began training me that afternoon. Ragnar refused to give me a new attack. He made me hold divine power while walking, eating, dodging stones, and being struck with a wooden staff. Every time the gold flickered, the staff found my ribs. After the 6th hit, I summoned Warrior Arsenal and swung back. Ragnar broke the weapon with one finger. "You own many sagas," he said. "Most help you move, see, summon, control, or survive. Where is the attack that belongs to Zane Halbrook? Skullbreaker belongs to me. It belongs to Aldrich's old story. You borrow the ending without changing the tale." He kicked my ankle and dropped me again. Bryn watched from the steps with the expression of someone reconsidering her hiring process. Ragnar planted the staff beside my head. "Sagas are stories. Stories change when people tell them differently. Stop treating every ability like a fixed button." Then he cut his own palm. Bryn moved forward, but Ragnar raised the wound toward me. "Cover the cut with divinity." I flashed gold through 2 fingers and touched the blood. Bryn placed healing light over the same skin. The wound remained open. "Divinity suppresses blessings at contact," Ragnar said. "Flash it when you strike. Holding it will empty you before the enemy notices." Bryn sealed the cut only after I withdrew the gold. The lesson was simple enough to remember and painful enough to trust. Before the next mission, Bryn drew temporary rune marks along both my forearms. "One stored burst," she said. "Use it when a normal shield is not enough." Ragnar looked at the marks. "Or, learn not to stand under arrows." Dax arrived at my ruined cabin carrying breakfast and stared at the legendary Viking. "Who is the murderer?" "My teacher." Dax nodded with fake wisdom. "Education has changed." Lyra, a silver-haired Valkyrie leading the expedition, stepped onto the departure platform. Her smile looked warm until the entire group went quiet without being told. "We're entering Svartalfheim," Lyra announced. "The Dark Elves asked for help after one of them woke a basilisk. Their medicinal herbs support Valhalla, so the creature dies before it reaches another village." She summoned enormous white wolves called Silent Wolves. Each mount moved without footfall and could cross the eternal night forest faster than horses. I settled onto one without trouble. Beast Commander steadied the animal before it could test me. Lyra watched the wolf accept my hands. "You ride well." Dax made a wounded noise. "Please don't encourage the branding." Lyra's smile widened. "What branding?" Romy answered before I could stop her. "He rode Elowin into a giant's face." Lyra looked me over again, then asked which legion owned my contract. Recruitment interest had arrived. I pointed at the forest. "Basilisk? Very eager to work," Dax muttered. Lyra left Romy in field command while she went to meet the local council. That removed the strongest official protector before we reached the village. An hour later, the first poisoned cup made her absence hurt. Our guide was Elder Marwick, the chief of a hidden dark elf settlement. Adults whispered from doorways when we entered. Children stared at our armor. Dragonsight marked most villagers neutral and Marwick friendly. Dragonsight called Marwick friendly. The closing windows disagreed. Romy noticed my hand moving toward the hilt. She did not ask in front of Marwick. She shifted her wolf closer until her knee touched mine, putting both of us within one movement of the village chief. Dax rode behind us and tried to wave at a group of children. Their mother pulled them indoors before they could answer. His hand lowered. The joke he had prepared never came out. Marwick kept smiling. Our people fear the basilisk. A guard ahead locked a side gate after we passed through it. Another removed the bell from a doorway. The village was preparing to contain something, and we were already inside. I refreshed Dragonsight at lower power and watched hostility flicker around the mansion walls. The friendly reading on Marwick remained. Either the ability was wrong, or he had prepared a way to look harmless. Both answers made dinner dangerous. Marwick welcomed the unit into his mansion. A banquet covered the long table, roasted meat, bright fruit, bread, wine, and enough hospitality to make Dax forgive the funeral atmosphere outside. Romy remained standing. One drink. We leave for the basilisk immediately. Marwick raised his cup. To friendship between Svartalfheim and Valhalla. The warriors lifted theirs. Dragonsight flashed red across the wine. Poison! Hostile signals appeared behind the walls. More gathered above the ceiling. The front doors started moving. I slapped Dax's cup from his hand, grabbed Romy's, and overturned the tray before anyone swallowed. Move, I told her. Romy did not ask for proof. She kicked the table into the windows as arrows punched through the wood. Marwick's friendly expression disappeared. Seal the doors. The banquet hall became a kill box. Dark elf archers fired from hidden balconies. Romy raised a shield formation while Dax shot back through the gaps. Warriors who had been seated seconds earlier dragged benches into cover. One poisoned cup rolled beneath the table and stopped beside Marwick's boot. He kicked it away, then ordered the archers to fire lower. The frightened Hostak died there. The chief wanted bodies. A warrior beside Romy took an arrow through the upper arm. She broke the shaft, moved him behind the shield line, and filled the gap herself. Dax shot the archer who had hit him, then put a second arrow into the pulley lowering the ceiling gate. The mechanism jammed halfway. Bought you 5 seconds, Dax called. I only need 3. I ran at the closing exit. 2 guards crossed spears in front of me. Stormstride carried me between them. I struck both wrists, shouldered one guard through the doorway, and slammed Warrior Arsenal into the locking bar. Wood and metal burst outward. Exit open, I shouted. Romy backed the unit toward me 1 row at a time. Marwick screamed for the archers to lower their aim. His perfect poison trap had failed, so he started spending soldiers to save face. Naturally, he made it worse. We reached the courtyard. The silent wolves had been driven beyond the gate. A second archer line rose across the rooftops and aimed down at the exposed formation. Dax looked up. That's a lot of arrows, Romy whistled for the mounts. They need 10 seconds. The archers released. I crossed both engraved arms. Bryn's rune marks ignited. Golden force expanded above the courtyard and struck the arrow storm in midair. Shafts shattered into splinters. Metal heads stopped, trembled, and dropped harmlessly around us. The dark elves on the roofs lowered their bows. One reread the empty string as if the weapon had betrayed him. Marwick stood in the doorway with his mouth open. Every defense he had planned for the escape disappeared in one burst. The warriors behind me reacted faster. 2 who had been limping straightened and ran for the gate. A third lifted the poisoned man onto a wolf instead of abandoning him. Bryn's training had bought 10 seconds, and everyone spent them. Our silent wolves arrived through the gate. The first wolf took an arrow across the flank and kept running. The second knocked a dark elf guard from the wall. Beast Commander carried one sharp command through the pack: break the line. Every mount hit a different opening instead of piling into the same gate. Romy mounted and pulled a wounded warrior behind her. Dax climbed onto his wolf, checked both sleeves for arrows, then looked at me. Marwick reached the courtyard in time to see the last rider escape. He grabbed an archer by the collar and demanded another volley with his own guard still in the path. The nearest archer hesitated. Marwick struck him and gave the order again. His need to save face had started consuming his own people. We entered the forest with poison already spreading through the wounded. Romy rode beside me. You trusted the warning before Dragonsight explained it. I trusted the windows. She glanced at the rune marks fading from my arms, and Bryn prepared the exit. Dax looked between us. This team contains too much functional communication. I feel excluded. Behind us, purple fire climbed above Marwick's mansion. A woman's voice crossed the trees. You wasted the first, the web witch told Marwick. The purple fire split open a red portal. The red portal opened behind us before the poison finished spreading. A green-skinned hunter stepped through carrying 2 curved blades. Dragonsight named him Regenerator Krell, the wounds already covering his chest closed while we watched. Marwick screamed from the distant village for the Web Witch to fix his failure. The Web Witch answered by sending Krell after us. Our poisoned warriors could not outrun him. Romy turned the silent wolves into a moving shield line while Dax fired toward the portal. Krell crossed the distance anyway. His first blade opened one wolf from shoulder to flank. His second struck a warrior from the saddle. Romy met him before the body hit the ground. Her bow was too long for the close range, so she drew both daggers. Krell smiled at the smaller weapons. Romy cut his throat. The wound sealed around her blade. He struck her across the ribs and threw her into a tree. Dax reached her first. "Take her and the wounded," I ordered. "Find Lyra. Fire every flare you own." Dax looked at Krell, then at me. "You are volunteering to be the bad decision. I have experience." He lifted Romy onto a silent wolf and pulled the surviving riders deeper into the forest. Krell watched them leave, then he stopped guarding. He believed regeneration made defense optional. I summoned a sword and attacked the open chest. The blade entered cleanly. The wound closed around it. Krell laughed and pulled me closer. His second blade entered my side. I remembered Ragnar's bleeding palm. Divinity suppressed blessings at contact. I flashed gold through the sword for 1 heartbeat. Krell's smile changed. Blood remained on the blade. The wound did not close. Krell looked down at the first permanent cut he had received in years. He took his first defensive step backward. "Beautiful!" I attacked again before the lesson became a speech. Stormstride carried the sword across his shoulder. Another gold flash left a second wound open. Krell stopped laughing. He crossed both blades and began fighting like pain mattered. The change made him faster. He cut my thigh, split one summoned sword, and drove me through a black tree. I replaced the weapon before landing. Every gold flash drained more of my remaining strength. Ragnar had warned me not to hold divinity. Krell forced me to spend it anyway. We crossed the forest in short, violent lines. I opened wounds. He avoided the next ones. The poison in my blood slowed everything between attacks. Krell let one strike pass his cheek to trap my wrist. Then, a hidden tail unfolded from behind his armor. The bone spike entered beneath my ribs and lifted me from the ground. Dragonsight had tracked blades, healing, and muscle movement. It had not shown the weapon hidden inside his body until it moved. Krell held me above the leaves. "You found a way to stop the healing." He twisted the tail. "You did not find a way to survive me." He raised one blade toward my throat. A silent wolf skidded into the clearing. Romy woke in Dax's arms as the mount hit the ground. She saw Krell's execution blade, tore free before Dax could stop her, and threw one dagger. The weapon struck Krell's wrist. His killing line moved an inch. That inch saved my neck. Dax fired behind her. A binding arrow wrapped the hidden tail and dragged it sideways. I fell from the spike. Romy caught my armor with one hand and used the other dagger to open Krell's knee. I flashed divinity through the wound. It stayed open. Krell kicked her away, but the confidence had left his face. Dax sent a red flare through the canopy while firing another binding line. Romy attacked from the left. I forced my body upright on the right. Krell could heal any normal wound. Now, every direction carried one he could not close. Romy cut the wrist holding the first blade. I drove Warrior Arsenal into the shoulder. Dax's arrow pinned the tail to a tree. Krell tore free and left part of the bone behind. For the first time, the Regenerator panicked. He turned toward the portal. Romy stepped into the escape line. "You came for wounded prey," she said. "Leave wounded." Krell charged her. I formed Skullbreaker behind him. Romy dropped beneath the blades and struck both knees. The hammer landed between his shoulders. The ground opened. Krell tried to rise from the crater. Gold still burned through every wound. Romy drove both daggers into the wrists. Dax's final arrow pinned his throat to the earth. I brought Skullbreaker down again. Regenerator Krell stopped moving. Dragonsight found no healing response. Romy checked me before she checked the body. "You were being executed," she said. "You interrupted." I noticed. Purple light opened far behind the dead Regenerator. Through the portal, Marwick screamed for the Web Witch to release the basilisk. Her answer was a laugh. The earth beneath us split. A massive basilisk pushed through the roots. Its scales were black-green stone. Poison rolled from its mouth. A broken ancient hilt protruded from the back of its neck. The creature looked at Krell's body and attacked us instead. Dax's flare had gone up, but rescue still needed time. Romy invoked Wolf Witch. Her body became a massive spectral wolf with dark fur and magenta eyes. She pulled me against her side as the veil spread around us. The basilisk stopped inches from my boots. Wolf Witch could hide a motionless pack. The problem was that my blood kept falling onto the leaves. Romy pressed closer and covered the wound with her body. "Do not move," she whispered. The basilisk tasted the air. Its jaw passed over her shoulder. I felt Romy's heartbeat through the veil. Mine was trying to report both fear and several unrelated thoughts. The monster moved past us. Romi's wolf ears flattened. "You are thinking loudly. I'm poisoned." "That is not the thought." The veil flickered. The basilisk turned back. Romi released the concealment and threw me clear before the jaws closed. We attacked together. I drew the creature's head with a charged sword. Romi tore open the eye in wolf form. The basilisk slammed her through a pillar. I used Stormstride along its neck and reached the broken hilt. The old metal burned against my hand. I pulled. The hilt came free with a length of black blade attached. The basilisk screamed and threw me into the earth. Romi changed back to human form beside the creature's blind side. Her last dagger entered the damaged eye. I rebuilt warrior arsenal around the ancient hilt and drove the new edge through the wound. The first basilisk fell. Then 3 more shapes moved beyond the trees. The Web Witch had not released one monster, she had released the rest of the nest. Romi looked at the surrounding pack, then at the open path behind me. "I'll hold them," she said. "Take the hilt and go." "Zane! We both leave or neither does." She held my gaze. No joke survived that moment. Romi rose beside me and drew one damaged dagger. I summoned a sword with both hands. She invoked the power of her goddess. I invoked Idun. The second basilisk charged. Romi stepped in front of me despite having offered to stay behind alone. I moved beside her and placed the broken hilt inside my armor. One remaining saga use lit my sword. Her damaged dagger carried the last of her curse. The basilisk opened its mouth. We both leaned forward instead of away. The decision had already paid the relationship question before rescue arrived. Neither of us would buy survival with the other person's body. A silent wolf hit the basilisk from the side. Dax rode at the head of the pack, firing before the mount landed. His first arrow buried itself in the basilisk's eye. The surviving warriors followed him through the trees. Then Lyra dropped from above and cut a monster in half before it reached Romi. The last basilisk lunged at me. Its body separated behind the head. Ragnar stood beyond it with his weapon lowered. "You two look terrible," he said. "I let my sword disappear. Your teaching style caused part of this." Then the useful part. The rescue arrived in 3 layers because Dax had done exactly what he promised. He carried Romi to safety, fired the flares, found Lyra, and pulled Ragnar away from whatever unfortunate object he had been using for training. Romi saw Ragnar clearly and froze. Color reached her face despite the poison and exhaustion. Dax noticed. I noticed Dax noticing. The warriors crowded Ragnar like fans around a champion. Romi, the terrifying manhunter, suddenly forgot where to put her hands. I looked at her. "You called me an idiot." "That was accurate. You're blushing at my abusive teacher." Romi recovered enough to glare. "I can do both." Jealousy was a ridiculous emotion to discover while standing beside basilisk corpses. I discovered it anyway. Lyra inspected Krell's permanent wounds, then the broken hilt in my hand. "You killed the regenerator and the basilisk while poisoned?" "Romi killed the part where I was being executed." Lyra's eyes moved between us. "Talent like yours won't stay unnoticed, Zane." The men nearest Ragnar turned and gave me synchronized death stares. One Valkyrie praised me, one legendary warrior had rescued me, and Romi was still holding my arm. Apparently survival had social penalties. Back in Valhalla, Bryn cleaned the hilt beneath Idun's temple light. The damaged runes refused to form words, but old energy moved through the metal when she touched it. "This came from an ancient war," Bryn said. "Older than the weapons our legions carry now." I closed my hand around the broken grip. The basilisk had left me one piece of junk. I had no idea that piece of junk had already survived a war with Loki. Bryn's ancient war hilt refused to explain itself, so Idun rewarded me with a completely different problem. The next morning, the goddess stepped from her statue and offered 2 gifts for the basilisk victory. One was a cloak from Olympus, the distant god realm that could turn me into a winged horse. The other was an infinite pouch that could store almost anything regardless of size. The choice looked insulting. Then I remembered black lightning coffins, emergency rations, broken relics, spare weapons, and Dax forgetting equipment whenever a mission became interesting. I took the pouch. Idun blinked. "You refuse flight? I already become a falcon. Infinite inventory is every gamer's actual religion." Bryn peered into the tiny opening. "How much can it hold?" I tested it by placing a chair inside. The chair vanished. I added the table. Bryn grabbed my wrist before I could reach Idun's ceremonial statue. "Enough testing," she ordered. The goddess laughed. "He chose correctly for your legion." "You own no supply train." That was the fake weak advantage of serving Idun. Famous legions received warehouses. I received a goddess personally watching me steal furniture into another dimension. Ragnar arrived outside the temple and asked, "How far have you gone with Bryn?" My mind chose the wrong meaning immediately. Bryn turned red. "Ragnar." He pointed at the divine aura around my hand. "Training. How far can he maintain it?" I hated that man with impressive consistency. Longer than yesterday, I answered. Then today will hurt longer. He proved it by beating me into the courtyard. Ragnar refused to teach a new divine attack. He made me hold the aura while eating, walking, dodging stones, and getting struck with a wooden staff. Every time the gold flickered, the staff found my ribs. After the 6th hit, I summoned Warrior Arsenal and swung back. Ragnar broke the weapon with one finger. You own many sagas, he said. Most help you move, see, summon, control, or survive. Where is the attack that belongs to Zane Halbrook? Skullbreaker belongs to me. It belongs to Aldrich's old story. You borrow the ending without changing the tale. He kicked my ankle and dropped me again. Bryn watched from the steps with the expression of someone reconsidering her hiring process. Ragnar planted the staff beside my head. Sagas are stories. Stories change when people tell them differently. Stop treating every ability like a fixed button. That rule landed because my broken hilt was sitting inside the infinite pouch. At lunch, Bryn cooked while I set the relic on the table. Warrior Arsenal could recreate weapons from Aldrich's memory. The hilt carried the shape of something older, so I pushed the saga through it. The broken grip lit gold. Metal grew from the damaged edge. A long blade reconstructed itself across the table. It was bright, heavy, and sharp enough to cut the wooden surface just by settling onto it. Bryn dropped the spoon. Ragnar stopped chewing. The man who treated divine explosions like warm-up finally looked impressed. You used the relic as a template, Ragnar said. I used the stats it remembered. That is not how warriors think. I wasn't a warrior when I built the habit. Ragnar lifted the golden blade, tested its balance, and smiled despite himself. Good. Keep the bad habits that work. The hilt had become the offensive path he demanded. It could give Warrior Arsenal the quality and history of a legendary weapon before I understood whose weapon it had been. Ragnar struck the reconstructed blade against his own weapon. The table split from the pressure, but the golden edge held. He checked it again, harder. Bryn grabbed the cooking pot before the second impact knocked dinner onto the floor. That relic can carry more than one shape, Ragnar said. Make every shape earn its existence. Bryn set down the replacement bowl and touched my shoulder. Be careful with it. Then, a message flare burst above Idun's temple. Eloan had requested me personally. Bryn read the seal twice. The Ice Princess needs support in Svartalfheim. You sound thrilled, Bryn answered. I am delighted another beautiful Valkyrie keeps requesting my only warrior. I heard the words. The tone disagreed. Ragnar stood. Take the hilt. Test the new story against something that hates you. The emergency column formed before sunset. Warriors from several legions crowded the road. Dax had been dragged away from a promised vacation and made sure everyone knew it. I had a bed, he complained. A real bed, no arrows in it. Romy rode beside me. You slept through the last attack. That was tactical rest. A pack of horned gnolls blocked the road while harpies circled above. The ground troops rushed first. I reconstructed the golden blade and released one divine arc through the front line. Armor split. The survivors scattered. Harpies dove at the supply wagons. Dax reached over his shoulder and found no crossbow. He stared at the empty strap. I forgot it. Romy looked at him with genuine pain. You complained about leaving for an hour and forgot the weapon. I brought snacks. The hilt shifted inside my hands. The golden blade broke into light, shortened, and reformed as a heavy crossbow. 3 rune channels opened along the body. I fired. The first bolt split into 3 shots. Each found a different harpy. The next volley dropped an entire row before it reached the wagons. Dax watched his profession become downloadable content. I'm being replaced by the man who forgot archery exists. I remembered the button. The last gnoll tried to retreat with a signal horn. Romy shot the horn from its hand. I changed the hilt back into a blade and cut the harness holding a captured supply cart. The cart rolled downhill, struck the enemy barricade, and opened the road for our column. Warriors who had been pinned behind the wagons surged through the gap. One slapped the golden blade with his shield as he passed. Another pointed at Dax's empty back and asked whether the famous archer had retired. Dax drew one of my spare knives. I am diversifying. The knife left his hand backward. Romy caught it without looking and returned it handle first. Diversify later! The hilt's new crossbow form had paid immediately, and the road victory exposed its limit. Every transformation drank from the same saga. Blade, crossbow, and barrage shared one reserve. Spam the menu, lose the character. Ragnar's lessons had found a way to become annoying even while he was absent. We reached the main battlefield at dusk. The enemy had copied Steel Rain. Rune-charged stones screamed over our heads and crashed into Valhalla's front line. Each impact released armored troops. The same ridiculous tactic that had fired me through Ironmouth looked much less funny from the receiving side. Beyond the main clash, a fireball arced toward a dark elf village. Eloan pointed at the village. The main army can hold. That fireball will erase civilians. She unclasped a white transformation cloak and wrapped it around Romy's shoulders. Speak the activation, Eloin ordered. Romy repeated the short phrase. Blue-white light covered her. The warrior became a long dragon with antler-like horns and bright scales. I climbed onto her back. Romy turned one glowing eye toward me. Boots off my scales. We are in a war. That was not permission. We launched anyway. The fireball struck the village outskirts before we arrived. Houses ignited. Dark elves ran with buckets while enemy troops sealed the road. Romy landed between the flames and the civilians. I jumped down, turned the hilt into the triple-shot crossbow, and cleared the nearest attackers. She used her dragon body to carry 3 wounded villagers at once. A child stood frozen beside a burning doorway. The roof beam cracked. I triggered Stormstride, crossed the yard, and pulled the child out before the beam fell. He grabbed my armor and refused to let go. Find your family, I told him. He pointed behind the fire giant walking into the village. The monster wore layered shields made from burning stone. Every flame around it fed the barriers. My first ancient dragon barrage filled the street with golden weapons and struck all 6 layers. 3 shields broke. The village fire surged. All 6 returned. That was the rule. As long as the environment burned, damage became repair. I fired again before the giant reached the civilians. The second barrage cracked 4 shields but emptied half my divine reserve. The barriers grew back while my legs started shaking. Romy landed beside me in dragon form. Stop feeding it the same answer, I noticed. The fire giant threw a molten spear. Romy turned her body around the villagers. The weapon struck her scales and blasted her through a wall. I drove the hilt into the street to remain standing. Then an oversized brass helmet appeared through the smoke. A dark elf firefighter dragged a hand pump behind him. More villagers followed with hoses and water carts. The village fire brigade had arrived dressed for comedy and carrying the only useful answer. Put out everything, I shouted. They opened the pumps. Water crossed the street. Buckets fell from rooftops. Romy beat her wings and turned the spray into rain. The flames died 1 block at a time. The giant's shield stopped rebuilding. It looked down at the dark stone where the fire had been. For the first time, the monster hesitated. I pulled every remaining weapon memory through the hilt. Ancient dragon barrage. Golden swords, spears, axes, and bolts filled the rain. The first wave broke the remaining shields. The second pinned both arms. The final spear entered the giant's chest and drove it through the street. The monster fell between the water carts. The firefighters stared at the corpse, then at their ridiculous helmets. One raised his pump like a battle standard. The village answered with a cheer. Romy returned to human form beside me, soaked and exhausted. You left your boots on my scales, she said. I saved the child. That is why you are forgiven once. The giant's broken core cracked open behind us. Black light pulled at the ancient hilt. I reached for Romy. The portal took both of us. The ancient war had never fully ended there. Romy and I woke inside a dark void where an ancient war was still repeating. Broken weapons covered the ground. Half-formed soldiers marched through blue fog, collided without sound, and dissolved before either side could win. The fire giant's core had opened a sealed pocket of old battle history. Far behind us, the village fire still glowed through the portal scar. It looked frozen. Time inside the void was moving differently. Romy stood and checked her bow. Exit? Dragon Sight found dead souls, old magic, and 1 pull deeper in the fog. No door yet. Dax would have complained about rations immediately. I opened the infinite pouch. Bryn's burned meat came out first. Romy stared at it. Put that back. I found 2 loaves, fruit, water, and the chair I had stolen during testing. Romy watched me place the chair in the middle of an ancient battlefield. You carried furniture into the void. I like comfortable emergencies. We ate while the ghost armies passed around us. Romy mentioned that Lyra had offered her a permanent transfer after the Basilisk mission. You refused? I asked. I already chose the unit I want. Her eyes stayed on the bread instead of me. I want to keep fighting beside you. The void supplied no helpful distraction. I put the remaining food away before my face betrayed me. We followed the magical pull across a field of ruined weapons. I started putting the broken pieces into the pouch. Romy looked back. Those are destroyed. Infinite storage removes the shame from looting. 1 belt carried Freya's mark, the goddess's seal for battle strength. When I fastened it, power steadied my legs and breathing. I handed Romy a blue-lit dagger from the same field. Gold crawled along its edge when her hand touched it. The dagger resonated with my broken hilt. The pull ended at a round crater. A black-red crystal stood at the center. A gravehound circled it inside deep claw marks. The beast's white defense shimmered around its entire body. Dragon Sight found no weak point in the armor. It found something better. Every claw mark formed a ring around the same center. The gravehound never left the crystal. Its absolute defense was tied to the fixed anchor. Romy drew her bow. I can keep it looking at me. Do not attack the armor. What are you attacking? The reason it stands there. Romy's never-miss arrow struck one eye and forced the gravehound to turn. The arrow did no damage, it bought movement. She invoked Wolf Witch and met the charge as a spectral wolf. The two creatures crashed across the ring. The Gravehound tried to return to the center after every exchange. I stopped summoning weapons. I ran straight for the crystal. The hound sensed the change and broke away from Romy. She caught one hind leg with both spectral jaws. I reached the center, wrapped both arms around the crystal, and pulled. Nothing moved. The Freya belt tightened around my core. I used Stormstride without traveling, turning the movement power into one violent upward force. The crystal tore free. Absolute defense vanished. The Gravehound dissolved before Romy's next bite landed. The black-red fragment screamed without sound inside my hands. A portal opened above the crater. Romy changed back and looked at the crystal. You defeated the Guardian by stealing its floor. I attacked the objective. We jumped through the portal. Outside, only moments had passed. We emerged above a ruined valley where Elowin was fighting an ancient giant. The giant saw the crystal against my chest. Its face changed. The seed! It roared. The ghost armies from the void followed us through the opening. They had no bodies, but they remembered the enemy. Their leader reached Elowin and asked for one final passage home. Elowin changed into ceremonial white and planted a Bifrost marker. I can give your soul solid form once, she said. Fight, then cross. Transparent armor became real across the ranks. Ancient warriors lifted weapons they had not felt in centuries. They charged the giant. The first wave caught its legs, the second locked the club arm. Romy drew her bow. Gold still moved along the arrow from the void dagger. Elowin noticed. Hold that power steady, she shouted. Your saga is touching divine history. Do not let it choose the timing for you. Romy's next arrow struck the giant's wrist and forced the club open. I used the hilt as a spear and pinned the other hand for 1 second. That second belonged to Elowin. She crossed the field in ice-white light and drove her spear through the giant's chest. The ancient warriors pulled together. The giant fell. A normal victory cheer would have sounded wrong there. The ghosts stood around the body, looked at their restored hands, and understood the borrowed time had ended. Their leader clasped my forearm. We will carry the story of the Seed-Bearer to Valhalla. Public belief-fed sagas. A whole army of ancient witnesses was about to repeat mine. Then, the Bifrost opened. The warriors crossed in ordered ranks and disappeared into color. The field stayed quiet after them. Elowin returned the moment to chaos by asking Romy how it felt to carry me as a dragon. Romy looked at me, heavy. I saved the village. You still had boots on my scales. Elowin took her cloak back, stepped close, and kissed my forehead as a Valkyrie blessing. My mind named 2 imaginary children before she gave Romy the exact same kiss. Delusion meter destroyed by ritual symmetry. Dax arrived with Linnea and Lyra after the battlefield stabilized. He saw my face and laughed until he had to sit down. Linnea sealed the crystal inside a chest, then gave me the same forehead blessing. Lyra kissed my cheek after I boldly asked whether expedition leaders followed equal reward rules. The surrounding warriors stopped laughing. They stared at me with pure betrayal. Then Bryn arrived. She saw Lyra's mouth leave my cheek. Zane, Bryn said with dangerous calm, how many official blessings does one report require? Protocol became complicated. Romy turned away to hide a smile. Linnea suddenly found the sealed chest fascinating. Lyra looked pleased with the damage she had caused. During the Black Lightning transport home, Bryn sat beside me in the coffin-shaped compartment. She kept asking whether I had enjoyed the ceremony. I survived it, I answered. You keep dodging. The transport shook. Bryn caught my collar, pulled me close, and gave me her own blessing. This one lasted longer. When she moved back, both of us were red. There, Bryn whispered. Now the report is balanced. Bryn kept hold of my collar for one extra breath before letting me go. Back at Idun's temple, the sealed chest waited beneath the statue. The goddess stepped down and placed one hand on the lid. This is part of Garm, the hound bound to Ragnarok, Idun said. One released howl can wake Fenrir, the chained wolf. Thor has the order to destroy it. 3 facts carried the whole threat. Decoration would only slow the panic. Bryn's fingers locked around mine. She had watched me carry the crystal against my chest. Now she knew one sound could wake the beast fated to kill Odin. Romy stood by the door with the related dagger. The Void Loot had stopped looking like a lucky side quest. Odin's later war record showed that the giant's shout exposed the fragment. The Web Witch had pushed Elder Marwick, Regenerator Krell, and 5 giant generals into the hunt. That meant Loki had put all 5 generals in motion. The real war had begun, and one Garm fragment was still unresolved. The morning after the seed breathing, at Idun's temple, the goddess offered me another flying cloak. The bright white gift came from Olympus and could turn me into a winged horse. The second option was a universal saddle. Idun held up the compact leather frame. It keys to its rider and reforms beneath the creature currently mounted. Size, species, and strength will not throw you. Bryn added the important part. It does not tame anything, so the murder attempt remains separate. Very separate. I chose the saddle. Another transformation sounded useful. Staying on the creature trying to kill me sounded necessary. At my cabin, I opened the infinite pouch and emptied the broken weapons from the void. Metal covered the floor, the bed, and most of the table. Ragnar looked through the doorway. Junk! Then the ancient hilt and Romi's blue-lit dagger answered each other. Gold crossed the pile. Ragnar stopped speaking. A memory opened across the cabin wall. I saw a lone warrior sail toward a black island wrapped in storms. Every story called its ruler the Queen of Shadows, a monster who killed challengers. The warrior stepped onto the shore and asked her for training anyway. She attacked before answering. The first spear broke his shield. The second threw him down the stone stairs. He returned the next morning. The queen attacked again. He returned again. Years passed inside the memory through wounds, rain, and repeated thrusts. The warrior learned to place one clean strike through defenses stronger than his body. A monster rose beneath his ship. Its bones later became a spear. The queen placed the finished weapon in the hero's hands. Gay Bolg. She taught him the law carried inside it. Aegeus was not raw force. It was a condition, a promise, and a consequence bound together. A shallow wound could punish what an army failed to break. The hero carried Gay Bolg through wars. No normal weapon survived. Then Loki destroyed the world around him. The spear shattered. Fragments crossed darkness in different directions. The memory ended with one piece falling toward Valhalla. The cabin returned. Ragnar stared at the broken hilt in my hand. The roll was unmistakable. This was the Gay Bolg hero whose memory had crossed my cabin wall. He had been trained by the Queen of Shadows and remained undefeated until Loki destroyed everything. This legacy could approach Sigurd, Ragnar said. Helpful comparison. It was not comfort. The hilt heated against my palm. A thin mark appeared across my skin. The relic had accepted the question, not the answer. Ragnar looked at the pile of fragments. Collect the rest, then find the old master. Romi touched the blue dagger. The Queen of Shadows may still exist. Ancient monsters are rude that way, Ragnar said. He looked toward the cliffs beyond my cabin. First, you need a mount that can reach places horses cannot. Dax had left a note beneath the cooking pot. It contained one sentence. Do not let Ragnar choose the animal. Bryn read it and agreed immediately. We camped below the Griffin Cliffs before dawn. Romi trained the gold trace still lingering around her arrows. Elowen had warned that divine history could choose its own timing if she did not stabilize it. Ragnar made her hold the aura while drawing and releasing its stones. The first arrow melted before leaving the string. The second turned in a circle and returned toward us. I ducked. Ragnar caught it. Better, he said. Romi stared at him. That was better? It returned. Ragnar asked whether she would join his future students after mastering the trace. Romi looked at me before answering. I already chose my unit. Bryn, who had arrived with the bait horses, heard the line. Her eyes moved from Romi to me. The griffin hunt had acquired relationship weather. We placed the horses in an open field below the cliffs. Ragnar handed me a glowing suppression rope. The enchantment weakens whatever it binds. Bryn set the universal saddle beside the bait. Remember, it keeps you mounted. It does not make the mount agree. 3 griffins descended. The first 2 struck the horses from opposite sides. Romi's arrows drove them away from the animals without killing them. I used Beast Commander to force one lesser griffin onto the ground. The universal saddle formed beneath me when I climbed onto its back. The creature screamed, rolled, and discovered the saddle was better at refusing than it was. Then, the Alpha arrived. The larger griffin dropped from the highest ledge with gold feathers along its wings and scars across one eye. It ignored the horses. It attacked me. The lesser griffin tried to flee beneath the saddle. The Alpha gained on us anyway. I transformed into a falcon before its claws reached my back. The universal saddle vanished with my human shape. The Alpha overshot. I climbed above it, returned to human form in midair, and landed on its back. The saddle reformed beneath me because I was now mounted on the Alpha. Ragnar's suppression rope looped around the griffin's neck. The Alpha rolled. The saddle held me through the sky, turning upside down. Romi caught the loose end from the ground and wrapped it around a stone post. The griffin tore the post free. The first suppression band snapped. Ragnar did not move to help. Your animal, he called. Very supportive. The Alpha climbed toward the cliffs with me still attached. Beast Commander pressed into its will for one heartbeat. The griffin resisted and broke the control. Permanent taming required submission, not one lucky command. I shifted warrior arsenal through the Gay Bolg hilt. A massive golden hammer formed above the rope. Forge hand opened through Aldrich's crafting memory. I struck the enchantment instead of the griffin. Gold spread across every suppression band. The rope's strength tripled. The Alpha lost altitude. Romi and Bryn pulled from below while Ragnar watched the line. The griffin hit the field, rolled, and dragged all 3 of us across the grass. I stayed on its back. It tried to bite my leg. The saddle shifted the grip loop away from the beak. Beast Commander pressed again. The griffin threw the command back at me. I let the pressure go before it broke both of us. Instead, I placed one hand against its neck and waited. The alpha breathed hard beneath me. Romy loosened the rope one measure. The griffin could attack again or stop. It looked at the open sky, then it lowered its head. The suppression glow faded without resistance. Submission had arrived before control. I climbed down and removed the rope. The griffin remained. Ragnar finally stepped forward. Name him. I touched the gold feathers at the base of the neck. Arrow. Arrow bowed once. Romy smiled. Deep respect. Arrow snapped at Ragnar's sleeve. Ragnar moved his hand before the beak closed. Selective respect, I said. 2 emergency flares rose beyond the cliffs. One burned west, the other burned north. Ragnar's expression changed first. Simultaneous distress calls. 2 units are under attack. Bryn transformed into a swan and lowered one wing for Romy. We take the northern signal. Ragnar climbed onto Arrow behind me. We take the west. The griffin had bowed less than a minute earlier. Celebration over. Arrow launched with Ragnar and me while Bryn carried Romy in the opposite direction. One of those signals was already drawing a giant general. Arrow earned his place beside Legends less than 5 minutes after I named him. The western flare led us over a ruined forest where Bastion's unit was losing to 2 giants. Trees had been crushed into lanes. Warriors were scattered between burning roots. One giant swung a stone club while the second drove defenders toward a ravine. Ragnar sat behind me on Arrow as if riding an alpha griffin into a disaster was normal transportation. Take the right giant, he ordered. I thought you were the teacher, Ragnar answered. I am teaching you to choose quickly. He jumped from Arrow before I answered. Ragnar landed on the left giant's shoulder, filled one fist with divinity, and struck once. The giant folded into the earth. One hit ended a creature that had been erasing squads. Bastion saw Ragnar and roared with relief. The right giant saw him too and raised its axe for the distracted warriors. I drove Arrow into a dive. The universal saddle held me through the acceleration. Arrow's claws struck the giant's weapon arm. I summoned a lance and drove it into the wrist, forcing the axe wide. Bastion stepped inside the opening. Son of Thunder wrapped his body. His own axe smashed through the giant's damaged weapon, continued across the chest, and split the boss to the ground. He landed beside the corpse, breathing hard. Around him, survivors dragged one another from the burning roots and reformed their line. One raised the axe the giant had knocked away. Another struck a fist against Bastion's shoulder guard. I brought Arrow down near him. Bastion looked from the dead giant to the griffin. You captured that today? About 4 minutes ago. A wounded warrior behind him pointed at me. That's Zane Halbrook, the one who rode a Valkyrie. I gestured at Arrow. Male griffin. The warrior nodded. Still the Valkyrie rider. The nickname had survived corrections, promotions, and now basic zoology. Dax's rumor refused to die. Ragnar walked out of the crater carrying no visible damage. Several warriors cheered his name first. Bastion received the next roar for finishing the second giant. Then the unit surrounded Arrow and stared at me like the mount itself was a promotion badge. Arrow snapped at one hand that reached too close. The crowd stepped back together. Respect his space, I warned. Bastion touched the broken head of his axe to Arrow's saddle. We need that speed. The flare had only bought us the bodies. Bastion pointed to his dead squad among the roots, then to a western gouge streaked with boar blood and crystal residue. The second fragment is inside that boar, he said. They're cutting it out now. The first fragment had never ended the hunt. Bastion summoned his divine ram, a massive horned mount called from Thor's legion. The animal struck the ground impatiently while he climbed onto its back. Ragnar pointed west. We catch them before extraction. Arrow launched. Bastion's ram charged below us, breaking through fallen trees. Ragnar ran across the ground between both mounts because apparently normal travel offended him. From above, Drakensight found the enemy trail. Burned brush, broken branches, and rune-like residue leaked from the fragment inside the boar. The trail ended in a wide basin. 4 giants guarded the center. Roughly 100 orcs formed a ring around a massive boar lying on an extraction platform. The animal's ribs were open, but black-red light kept the body twitching. The fragment's aura had possessed the corpse and turned it into a mobile guardian before the enemy restrained it. Purple fire mages worked around the wound, trying to cut the crystal free. Ragnar looked at the 4 giants. I'll handle those. Bastion looked up. All 4? Ragnar was already moving. The giants turned as he entered their ring. Lightning and divine force exploded across the basin. That left Bastion and me with 100 orcs, the extraction mages, and the boar. Very balanced division of labor. Bastion lowered his axe. Straight through? Straight through is what they expect, he grinned. Then, faster. The divine ram charged first. Its horns threw orcs from the front line. Arrow dropped behind the second ring while I shifted warrior arsenal through the gay bulk hilt. Stormstride had evolved under the relic's pressure, carrying lightning around the blade as we dived. I left the saddle in midair. The universal saddle held my landing angle until the last possible instant. I struck the ground among the extraction mages and released the lightning through the rebuilt weapon. 3 mages flew from the boar, their tools shattered. One reached for the exposed fragment, and I pinned the sleeve to the earth before the hand closed. Bastion arrived through the front line with a spinning axe wave. Orcs who had turned toward me were caught from behind. The divine ram trampled the ones trying to regroup. We met beside the boar. Faster enough? Bastion asked. An orc captain attacked over his shoulder. I cut the captain down. Ask after the 100. The boar's corpse jerked against the platform. Black-red light filled the open ribs. The fragment tried to rebuild its guardian around us. Bastion drove his axe into the restraint frame while I cut the extraction marks from the stone. Arrow swept across the outer ring and took every safe angle away from the mages. Ragnar's first giant fell behind us. The second lost an arm. The third and fourth attacked together. He met them with one weapon and no visible concern. The platform finally broke. The possessed boar rolled free and slammed through the orc ring. It was no longer restrained, but the fragment had not chosen a side. The guardian attacked whatever stood closest. That included us. Bastion's ram struck it from the side. The 2 sacred beasts tore across the basin while I climbed back onto Arrow. Then, the sky darkened. A black transport fell through the clouds. It did not slow. The object struck the basin between Ragnar and the boar. The impact erased the extraction platform and threw warriors from their feet. A giant woman walked out of the crater. Dragonsight gave me one name. Varka. The pressure around her body made every other giant look unfinished. Ragnar stopped smiling. Varka saw him and laughed. You left your fortress. You came out of yours. The 2 of them had fought before. The exact history remained buried, but neither needed an introduction. Bastion's divine ram charged Varka before he could call it back. The mount lowered its horns and carried Son of Thunder through the basin. Varka caught the ram's skull with one hand. She closed her fingers. The divine construct shattered into light. Bastion stopped moving. The empty space where his mount had stood hit him harder than the shockwave. Varka stepped toward him. Ragnar entered the path. Her first punch struck his weapon. The collision split the basin floor. Varka's attention sharpened. Still protecting weaker warriors, Ragnar answered. Still needing them protected from you. She attacked again. Ragnar blocked 3 strikes and gave ground on the 4th. Each step carved stone behind him. Bastion tried to stand. Varka looked past Ragnar and opened one hand toward him. Ragnar abandoned his own attack and crossed the distance first. He took the blast on his shoulder. The possessed boar charged from the side before Varka could finish him. Its black-red tusks struck her armor and moved her half a step. That was more than our entire extraction team had managed. Varka caught the boar and threw it through the orc line. The fragment remained inside the body. The objective had survived. So had the opening. Ragnar grabbed Bastion by the armor and threw him toward Arrow. I caught him across the saddle. Retreat, Ragnar ordered. Bastion fought the grip until he saw Ragnar's face. Then he stopped resisting and caught Arrow's saddle with both hands. Ragnar turned back toward Varka. Lightning spread from his feet. Dark armor formed around his body. Warrior silhouettes rose behind him like an army remembered through one man. King of Vikings! The legend answered with lightning. Varka smiled and entered the storm. I kept Arrow moving long enough to get Bastion out of the immediate collision. Neither of us intended to obey for long. King of Vikings had forced Varka onto defense. Then she noticed the wounded warriors behind Ragnar. The surviving soldiers were trying to carry one another out of the basin. Some had broken legs, others had lost shields. Every step they gained existed because Ragnar kept Varka facing him. Varka understood the arrangement. Her next attack did not aim at Ragnar. She gathered her domain into one dark wave and sent it past his shoulder toward the retreating line. Ragnar had a clear opening at her throat. He abandoned it. King of Vikings crossed the wave and spread both arms between the attack and the soldiers. The blast hit him full in the chest. His legendary armor shattered across the basin. Ragnar remained standing long enough for the last wounded man to reach cover. Then one knee touched the ground. Varka smiled. There! That is the weakness I remember. Ragnar wiped blood from his mouth. Protecting people is not weakness. It made you kneel. It made them live. Bastion heard every word from Arrow's saddle. He looked at the retreating warriors, then at the empty space where his divine ram had vanished. Turn around, he told me. I already had. Arrow banked back toward the basin. Ragnar saw us returning and roared. Leave! Bastion jumped before Arrow landed. His legs failed on impact. He rolled, came up on one knee and threw his broken axe at Varka anyway. The weapon could not hurt her. Bastion knew it. Varka knew it. She still had to move one hand to knock it aside. That was the opening. I rose above the basin on Arrow and pulled every usable form through the ancient hilt. Warrior Arsenal became a massive frame around my arms. Stormstride compressed wind into the barrel. Skullbreaker supplied impact. The reconstructed relic carried ancient density. Divinity filled the rune channels until my fingers went numb. Ancient Dragon Cannon. The weapon was the largest attack I had ever built. It needed Arrow's speed, Bastion's distraction, and Ragnar keeping Varka inside one firing lane. Ridge shields lifted behind us. Bastion braced one hand against the ground. Ragnar shifted half a step and forced Varka's next punch to miss the barrel. I fired! Golden light swallowed the basin. The recoil tore me from the saddle. Arrow caught my armor with one claw before I hit the ground. The beam crossed Varka, continued through the hills behind her, and cut the clouds open above the battlefield. Every remaining warrior stared into the smoke. For one beautiful second, nobody knew the answer. Then Varka walked out. Varka carried no wound and no broken armor. The strongest attack I had ever created had earned a 0-star review. Varka looked at the trench behind her, then at me. That was worthy of a general, she said. Bastion tried to stand. You heard her! Do it again! My hands have resigned. The ancient dragon cannon had emptied the divinity from my arms. Warrior arsenal flickered and vanished. Varka's smile changed. Respect sharpened her aggression. I will answer at full strength. Her domain collapsed inward around her body. The basin stopped shaking because all that pressure had become one target, me. The wounded warriors on the ridge understood it before I did. Several lowered their shields and tried to crawl farther away. Varka had stopped treating me like a loud rookie beside a legend. The failed cannon had promoted me into the threat list. Arrow landed behind me with one wing dragging. The griffin had carried the recoil and lost feathers down one side. He still planted himself between Bryn's barrier and the basin, refusing to leave while I stood inside it. I touched his neck. You have already earned the name. Arrow shoved my shoulder forward. Apparently the mount had learned Ragnar's teaching style. Ragnar stepped between us. Bastion dragged himself to Ragnar's right. I landed on the left with an ordinary sword because every impressive weapon had already failed. 3 men faced a general who had just walked through our maximum output. Bryn's golden barrier appeared at the edge of the basin. She and Romy had reached the western front after securing their own flare. Varka's domain kept them outside the killing lane. Romy fired through the pressure. Her arrow bent away before touching the giant. She changed the angle and fired again. The second arrow rode the trench cut by my cannon and reached Varka's shoulder before the domain threw it aside. No damage. A useful fact, the pressure was not a perfect wall, it was a current. Romy shouted the observation to us. Ragnar heard it and shifted his next attack into the cannon trench. That forced Varka to turn rather than simply crush forward. Bastion used the same lane to recover his axe handle. I used it to reach my feet. Bryn struck the barrier with both hands. Zane! I looked back once. Her face made retreat feel possible. Ragnar's bleeding shoulders made it impossible. Varka charged. Ragnar met her first. His weapon cut across her forearm. She caught the handle, pulled him forward, and drove one knee into the center of King of Vikings. The spectral armor broke. He did not release the weapon. Ragnar twisted the trapped handle and used Varka's grip to drag her offline. I crossed behind him with Stormstride and cut the back of her knee. The blade scored armor and no more. Bastion struck the same point with the broken edge of his axe. Varka's leg bent half an inch. That tiny movement gave every wounded soldier on the ridge one stupid breath of hope. A man who had been crawling stopped to look. Another raised his shield again. 3 battered bodies had forced one adjustment without dealing real damage. Then Varka punished the optimism. Her domain burst outward from the bent knee. The wave lifted Bastion and me together. Ragnar anchored himself by driving his weapon into the ground. He caught Bastion by one wrist and my armor with the other hand. For 1 second, he held all 3 of us against the pressure. The stone under his feet failed first. We crashed across the basin. Bastion attacked the exposed side. Son of Thunder wrapped him one final time. Varka backhanded the axe apart and struck his chest with the same motion. Bastion hit the ground and did not rise. I used Stormstride toward her blind angle. Varka turned anyway. Her fingers closed around my sword. She broke it. I summoned another. She broke that too. I shifted to Skullbreaker. Varka caught the hammerhead and drove it back into my ribs. The world became ground, sky, and ground again. Ragnar forced himself up and caught her next strike before it reached me. Varka threw him across the basin. He collided with a broken ridge and disappeared beneath stone. Romy's arrows hit Varka from 3 angles. They broke against the domain. Varka looked toward Romy. I hit her from behind to keep that look from becoming an attack. The strike did nothing except turn her back toward me. Bryn's barrier reached the crater before Varka's fist. Varka punched through it. The shield shattered into sparks. Bryn was thrown backward. Romy caught her before she hit the ground, but the 2 women slid across the basin together. I forced one hand around the broken hilt. The relic pulsed once. Varka stepped into the crater and grabbed my armor. She lifted me until my feet hung above the broken ground. Behind her, Ragnar tried to rise. One arm failed, he pushed with the other. Bastion moved a hand near the dead ram's fading light. Romy dragged Bryn behind a stone ridge, then turned back toward me with an arrow already on the string. Every person I cared about was still trying, none of us had enough. Varka tightened her grip. Your cannon was worth seeing, your body is not. I tried to summon one more blade. Warrior Arsenal flickered and died. She threw me down again. The second impact erased the battlefield. Sound left first. Pain followed. None of those memories offered a menu. They formed one question. Had I become strong because the powers chose me, or had the powers stayed because I kept choosing people after the easy exit appeared? Then the falling stopped. I opened my eyes in a field of stars. The gay bold hero stood in front of me. The same warrior from the cabin vision held a complete spear made from dark blue light. No face stayed fixed inside the glow. The relic carried too much broken history for one clean name. You reached me by choosing the lost fight, the spirit said. Did I? The spirit answered, you are deciding. Excellent. Even ancient weapons had contract language. The spirit planted the spear beside us. Fragments of the weapon circled through the star field. You are my next student, the gay bold hero said. Collect the fragments. Find the Queen of Shadows, my old master. This piece accepts one curse strike. 3 facts. 1 chance. What does the curse do? What falls cannot break, a Gias may punish. The spirit held out a broken dagger, the same shape Romy had carried from the void. Use it once, the fragment will empty. If you miss, the lesson ends with you. Behind the spirit, the battlefield appeared like a reflection in black water. Ragnar lay beneath broken stone. Varka walked toward the seed. Bryn's barrier was cracking. Romy's last arrow trembled on the string. The spirit watched me. You may remain here until the body fails. No! I took the dagger. I'm going back. The hero's grip closed around my wrist. Why? Because Ragnar stayed for us. The stars folded inward. The last thing I heard was the spirit's command. Go back, Zane Halbrook. Bring me the remaining pieces. Bryn brought me back by putting a golden apple between her own teeth. That was the first image my mind managed when the stars broke apart. Her face hovered over mine. Golden light burned between us. The apple fragment transferred when she pressed her mouth to mine and forced the last of Idun's stored life into my body. My lungs opened. Every broken rib objected at once. I coughed hard enough to ruin the romance of the method. Bryn pulled back with tears on her face and one hand still locked around my collar. You died, she said. Temporarily. Bryn snapped. You stopped breathing. I was between updates. Bryn hit my chest. Pain exploded through every repaired bone. Excellent healing review, I wheezed. She leaned over me again, furious and shaking. Do not joke your way past this. The battlefield returned around us. Varka was walking toward Ragnar's buried position. The second Garm fragment still glowed inside the dead boar. Purple fire circled above the basin, feeding the wet witch's support into the giant general's domain. Romy stood at the edge of Bryn's broken barrier with one arrow left. Bastion, the Thor Legion warrior, lay behind her with his chest armor crushed and both hands empty. Ragnar had stayed for all of us. I pushed myself up. Bryn caught both shoulders. Your body is repaired. Your power is not. The apple cannot refill your sagas. I know. Then stay here. Varka lifted one hand over the stone burying Ragnar. I removed Bryn's hands and stood. No. The word stopped her harder than an argument. Bryn had collected my soul, healed the body, earth had ruined, trained my runes, and crossed 2 battlefields to reach me. She had never asked me to be fearless. She had asked me to come back. I covered her hand with mine. I will, I promised. But I cannot leave Ragnar there. Her eyes searched my face for the lie. I gave her none. Bryn pressed her forehead against mine once. Then come back to me again. Romy stepped beside us and raised the damaged bow. I have 1 arrow. I have 1 strike. Bryn lifted the cracked shield. I have 1 terrible plan involving both of you. Every step toward Varka reopened something. Golden light sealed the worst damage as quickly as it formed. The revival gave me movement, not strength. Varka bent toward the fallen boar. The web witch's purple fire crawled across the ground near her feet. The general's attention stayed on the Garm fragment. Romy fired first. Her final arrow carried the unstable gold trace from the void. It curved toward Varka's eye. Varka turned and caught it. The arrow did no damage. Gold remained across her fingers. She looked at Romy. I activated Sky Feather for 1 burst, crossed the broken terrain as a falcon, and changed back behind her. The gay bulk fragment became a narrow dagger through warrior arsenal. Varka sensed me before the blade landed. She turned, laughed, and struck with the back of one hand. I accepted the hit to finish the thrust. The dagger cut her palm. Varka threw me across the crater. I hit the ground and rolled until Bryn's shield stopped me. Romy fired the broken half of her arrow over my shoulder. The motion forced Varka to raise the wounded hand. Gray stone had already formed around the cut. Varka looked at her palm. The petrification spread across 2 fingers, then the wrist. Her smile disappeared. Dragon sight had found no weak point. Ancient dragon cannon had filled the battlefield and left her untouched. One broken fragment had entered through a shallow cut and kept going. The Geas ignored the strength we had failed to overpower. Varka grabbed her own wrist. Stone reached her forearm. She poured giant power into the curse. Dark light struck the gray skin and broke chips from the surface. The petrification continued beneath it. The new stone crossed veins, locked joints, and climbed faster each time she tried to force it backward. Since landing, Varka had never backed away without a hit. Now she took one step, then another. Her eyes stayed on the tiny cut. It scared her more than Ragnar's mythic strikes or my giant cannon. One nearby giant saw the stone and retreated. Several orcs dropped their weapons. Bryn raised her shield between Varka and me. Romy moved to my other side with the empty bow held like a staff. My arm shook around the spent dagger. Varka's face settled into a decision. She placed one hand above the spreading stone. Then she tore the cursed arm off at the elbow. The severed limb hit the ground and became solid gray before it stopped moving. The curse had forced a giant general to amputate herself. Varka looked at Ragnar beneath the stones. Then she looked at me. "Ragnar is dangerous now," she said. "You are more dangerous later." The words reached the ridge. 2 wounded warriors turned from Ragnar to me. Romy moved behind my right shoulder. Bryn took the left. Both were exhausted. Both raised their weapons anyway. Valhalla's scrawny mistake was now the threat. A giant general wanted erased. Purple flame wrapped Varka's severed arm. The web witch rebuilt flesh and bone from the wound. First, a black framework extended from the stump. Muscle followed. Skin sealed over it while smoke rolled from the fingertips. Within seconds, the visible damage had been erased. Romy watched the new hand flex. "Can the curse spread again?" "The fragment is empty," I told her. Bryn tightened her shield grip. "Then she has to believe it isn't." She lifted the golden barrier high enough to hide my dagger hand. Romy aimed the empty bow at Varka's regenerated wrist, selling the possibility of a second cursed strike. The bluff made her hesitate before charging an exhausted target. Then Varka's pride beat the hesitation. She opened and closed the new hand while watching the dagger. Then she smiled again. "Good," she said. "Now I know which one to kill first." Her domain pressed down with more force than before. Bryn's shield cracked. Romy's knees bent. My body nearly folded where it stood. The gay-balled fragment stayed cold. Its one use was spent. Varka charged. Blue lightning split the battlefield before she reached us. A hammer struck Varka's fist. The collision stopped her charge and blasted the domain outward in a circular wave. Bryn's shield held long enough for all 3 of us to stay on our feet. A red-haired god stood between Varka and me. Thor turned his head just enough to see us behind him. "Forgive the delay, Zane Halbrook." He knew my name. One man near the ridge repeated Zane Halbrook aloud. Another lowered his weapon and stared at me as if Thor had just promoted my legend in front of the whole battlefield. Romy's bow dropped a few inches. Bryn's cracked shield stopped shaking. Valhalla's ravens had followed the seed since the first fragment. Thor carried the order to destroy it, and Varka's domain had made the battlefield impossible to miss. Thor had followed a world-ending target into a physical war and put his body between Varka and mine. The rescue was physical intervention, never a ruling. Varka stepped back from the hammer. "Thor." Thor faced her fully. "You have injured warriors under my protection and reached for a fragment you were warned to leave buried." The web witch's flame recoiled from his lightning. Varka raised her regenerated hand. "Then take it!" Thor lifted one arm. Wind gathered above the basin. A tornado descended around the battlefield and tore Varka's oppressive domain apart. The pressure crushing my body vanished. Warriors gasped as their lungs opened. Bryn's cracked shield steadied. Arrow rose from the ground and spread his wings again. Thor pointed toward the ridge. "Lower ranks, withdraw." The lower ranks moved immediately. Nobody wanted to learn what Thor's next exchange did to spectators. Romy hooked one arm under mine. Bryn took the other. "I can walk," I told them. Romy pulled harder. "You can complain. We'll count that as recovery." We moved toward Ragnar first. He was conscious beneath the broken stone, barely. One eye opened when Thor's lightning crossed the basin. "Get everyone back!" Ragnar ordered. Bryn knelt beside him. "You need healing, after the god stops throwing half the battlefield." Bastion groaned several yards away. Arrow reached him first, nudging the Thor Legion warrior's armor until he responded. The surviving soldiers started dragging both men toward the ridge. Bastion opened one eye and saw Thor standing where Ragnar had stood. "He came," Bastion whispered. Ragnar managed a rough laugh. "You sound surprised. My ram was louder." The joke ended when Thor threw his hammer. Varka blocked with both arms. The weapon carried her off the ground anyway. She crossed the basin, broke through a wall of stone, and flew into the air beyond it. Thor vanished inside a bolt of lightning and appeared above her. Varka twisted in midair and struck first. Her fist met the side of his hammer. The collision drove a ring through the clouds, but Thor's arm barely moved. He caught her shoulder with his free hand and redirected the entire charge toward the ground. His second strike drove the giant general downward. She hit one knee, rolled through the crater, and came up with a piece of broken earth in both hands. Varka threw the slab like a shield and followed behind it. Thor's hammer smashed the stone. She emerged from the fragments and landed 3 blows against his chest and jaw. The warriors on the ridge went silent, waiting for the first visible damage. Thor lowered his chin without blood or stagger. One short hammer strike to Varka's ribs sent the giant general airborne again. Bastion watched the exchange, then looked at the empty space where his divine ram had died. "She can't set her feet," he whispered. Ragnar managed a rough breath. "Thor never gives them back." The same enemy who erased that mount with one palm was being thrown wherever Thor wanted. Varka hit the earth hard enough to create another crater. The warriors on the ridge began chanting Thor's name. The sound built from scattered voices into one rolling roar. Even wounded men lifted weapons they could barely hold. Varka climbed out of the crater. Blood marked one side of her face. Her regenerated hand shook once before she closed it. Thor's hammer returned to his grip. Varka had walked through my cannon and shattered our entire group. Thor moved her with every hit. The final boss had met the admin. Brynn tightened her arm around my ribs, ending the joke. Ragnar had spent his winning strike on weaker warriors. I watched Thor stand in front of us and wanted one thing: enough power to take that position next time. Varka rushed Thor again. Her fists carried the same force that had erased Bastion's ram. Thor caught the first, turned the second, and struck her chest with the hammer's handle. Lightning burst through her armor. She slid backward, but stayed upright. Varka planted one foot, gathered her remaining domain into a narrow blade of pressure, and cut it across the field. Thor raised the hammer. Blue lightning met the attack and split it into 2 streams that passed around him. One stream carved a trench beside the ridge. The other tore through the abandoned orc line. Thor walked through the gap he had made. Varka attacked his wrist, trying to disarm him. The hammer left his hand on purpose, circled behind her, and struck the back of her knee. She dropped. Thor caught the returning weapon before it touched the ground. A warrior near me whispered, "He planned the miss." Ragnar heard him and managed a rough laugh. "He planned it." The exchange gave the wounded men more than spectacle. They started moving faster toward safety because Thor had shown that Varka could be controlled. Fear stopped pinning them in place. The retreat changed shape behind us. Men who had crawled under Varka's domain now lifted wounded friends and moved in organized lines. Romy passed her broken arrow to a fighter with a working bow. Brynn used the edge of her shield as a crutch without taking her eyes off Thor. The web witch's voice came through a wider patch of purple flame. "Varka, accept my veil. I can hide you beyond his sight. Leave the fragment and survive." Varka looked toward the fire. Every rational part of the battlefield waited for her to agree. She spat blood and laughed. Her own giants had already backed away. The purple flame offered safety, and every wounded warrior heard her refuse it. Varka had lost one hand, regained it, and still chose the answer that guaranteed Thor would hit her again. "Hide from him?" Varka asked. "That is a coward's victory." The web witch's flames tightened. "You cannot defeat Thor in your current state. Then I will use everything." Varka's aura rose again, stripped of the wide domain and compressed around her body. The ground beneath both feet sank. Her severed and restored arm darkened with giant magic. The air around her fists warped. Thor rolled his shoulders and lifted the hammer. Ragnar watched from Arrow's side, face pale beneath the blood. "Move farther," he ordered. "This is no longer our battle." The warriors obeyed him. Romy and Brynn pulled me behind the ridge. I kept one hand around the spent gay bulk fragment while Thor and Varka faced each other across the ruined basin. Varka charged with everything left. Thor met her in blue lightning. The collision erased sound. White light covered the field. When the light cleared, Varka was on her knees. Thor stood untouched.